The Yukon Huskies just took a shock early season loss to the unranked NC State, losing by double digits. Despite their impressive thumping of Dayton on opening night, the many positive signs we saw from that game disappeared against the Wolfpack. There's a number of reasons why the Huskies fell short today, but one stands above the rest, and it's an issue we've seen Yukon be hurt by in the past. That issue, of course, is an over-reliance on Paige Bueckers offensively. So, in today's video, I'll be breaking down the loss Yukon suffered to the Wolfpack, the multitude of things that caused their poor performance, and ultimately, the major trap I'm afraid they're starting to fall back into. Before we start, if you're new here and enjoy the video, be sure to subscribe for more women's basketball content like this. But with that being said, let's talk about the Yukon Huskies. Now obviously, credit where it's due, NC State played a fantastic game. Despite being unranked and coming into this game as pretty significant underdogs, they took it right up to Yukon from the jump. Sania Rivers was fantastic, scoring 33 points and completely exposing Yukon's poor defensive strategy. It was a great individual performance, which included some really tough jumpers made. It was so fun to watch her go at it. Yukon, however, didn't really help themselves either in this one, and there's many ways that was apparent. Firstly, the rebounding from the Huskies was simply not good tonight. They got out-rebounded by 12, 41-29, and were constantly out-hustled on their own glass. Like here, Aaliyah Edwards misses a layup after a great contest by Rivers, but the ball basically falls straight back to her, but her effort to make up for the miss just isn't there. It's kind of a half-hearted reach of the ball, so instead, the hustling NC State big scoops it up. That leads me into another issue with Yukon in this game too. They missed countless gimme shots, a ton of layups they should be knocking down every single time. It was hard to watch, and it's something I hope Gino Auriemma grills them on, because really, if they make those easy close shots, they probably win this game, or at least give themselves a good chance to win it anyway. I don't mean to call out Azzi here, because to start this game she was fantastic, getting herself in brilliant positions to score and shoot the ball. And this drive from her here is actually great. As with her high IQ, she recognizes that the NC State defense have failed to set up quickly enough, so she sprints behind it, receives the ball and attacks the paint, but she blows the finish. In my eyes, that miss sort of killed Azzi's confidence for the rest of this game, and it's why she seemed quite passive throughout the rest of this match. But it wasn't just Azzi though, it was really the whole team, and they simply need to be better if they're to contend for a national championship. Defensively, Yukon were completely out of sorts, and it was basically inexcusable how poorly they played on this end. They missed countless rotations, there was confusion on that end, and for a team with such good defensive players like Nika Mule, Paige Bueckers, and even Aaliyah Edwards at the best of times, to allow NC State to shoot 55% from the field and 38% from three is simply unacceptable. Like, take a look at this play here. Immediately to begin the possession, Yukon has 4 players above the 3-point line, and I'd argue only 2 are really in a decent position to guard NC State players. Paige recognizes that she's lost, so she has to sprint to the opposite corner to pick up her player. This confuses Aaliyah Edwards, who briefly loses her player, and now that NC State player has a wide open lane to the basket for a layup. Edwards is completely out of position here. Luckily for her, KK Arnold's hard work on the ball handler prevents that pass from occurring, cutting off that passing lane with her quick sliding movements. However, as Aubrey Griffin tries to come over to disrupt that driving lane as well, it leaves 2 Wolfpack shooters wide open on the weak side, with Azzi unable to get out to either of them properly. It results in a wide open 3 from the corner that is cash and reflects a terrible defensive possession for the Huskies. Here's another one from the third quarter. Azzi and Paige don't communicate, so both get into the paint to try and negate a drive, but that leaves 2 shooters wide open at the top of the key for a kick-out pass. Those are just a couple of examples, but it highlights what was happening for most of this game. The communication and rotations defensively for Yukon were very poor tonight. I won't blame this loss entirely on the players though, because I think Gino Auriemma definitely has some work to do with his coaching strategies. Obviously, it's still very early on in the season, so I'm not going to overreact here and be all doom and gloom. The Huskies have so much depth, it's unbelievable. I'd argue they are the most stacked team in the country when it comes to talent on paper, and if they all get clicking, their offense is going to be so hard to consistently defend against. We saw glimpses of that against Dayton when Edwards went off for 20 points and Paige Beckers was able to comfortably make a positive impact without too much reliance on her to score the ball to keep the offense ticking over. But that didn't happen today, and partially it's because Auriemma needs to figure out these rotations and trust some other players on this team. After getting smashed on the glass constantly tonight, I'm shocked that there wasn't a too big lineup run. Instead, they're just being one out there for most of the game, mainly Aaliyah Edwards. Personally, I feel like UConn needed more big physical bodies out there crashing the glass, and they just didn't get that. And in my eyes, Gino probably should have recognized that and made some adjustments to prevent the game from where it was inevitably heading. However, the biggest problem with this game in the end for me though, was that it felt like UConn was sinking back into their old ways from the start of the 2021-22 season, where it felt like they couldn't create any offense without Paige Beckers. There was a clear over-reliance on her to create scoring opportunities in the second half, but with a severe lack of off-ball movement, which is what a lot of the Huskies' offense stems from, it resulted in high levels of iso ball and solo drive to the basket that would regularly be heavily contested. When Paige wasn't controlling the possession, the Huskies seemed lost out there, taking on bad drives or passes, like you can see in these clips here. And NC State of course took advantage of that, building a big lead in the early stages of the fourth quarter when Beckers was resting on the bench. Moreover, this is why we saw NC State have so many blocks tonight, because the Huskies' offense was just straight up predictable. Sure, Beckers did a great job and really did all she could to try will UConn to a win in this game, finishing with 27 points and taking on NC State defenders in isolation possessions like these. But her doing it alone is never going to work. It's a trap I hope the Huskies realize now and don't continue to fall into, because we know it hurts their offense majorly. In big games against good teams like this, especially with Maryland and UCLA on the fast approaching calendar, UConn need to maximize their depth and utilize the variety of skill sets they have available to them. Relying on Paige to do it all will just not work, and we've seen that in years past. While it is amazing to see Paige Beckers back to her best self after her injury and to see newcomers like Caden Samuels shooting the hell out of the ball, it is frustrating to see these kind of issues reappear for UConn. We know how elite UConn can be when they maximize their depth, so hopefully this is just an early season blip and not a trend we see continue. Obviously, the over-reliance on Beckers wasn't the only issue here in this game. Defensive communication and rebounding were pretty major problems in this loss too for sure. But I know how problematic a struggling and non-confident offense can be for UConn, so that's why I'm bringing it up in today's video. Ultimately, let's try not to react too much and just see what happens from here, because the Huskies do have some major tests coming up over the next few weeks where they can prove themselves and solidify their spot as a top 3 team in the nation. But ultimately, I think we all have a right to be a little bit concerned from tonight's game against NC State. It wasn't a memorable one, that is for sure. If you made it this far, you must have enjoyed this analysis, so be sure to like the video and subscribe for more women's basketball content like this. But with that being said, I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.